Good afternoon and welcome to the meeting of Council. As today we mark Emergency Services Day, on behalf of the Council, may I convey the Council's thanks to all the NHS and the emergency workers and volunteers, particularly for the sacrifice that they have made during the pandemic to keep our community safe. The contents of the agenda for today's meeting has been arranged by the Chief Executive in consultation with myself and the group leaders. Council Procedure Rules 13 relating to the process for agenda will not be applied. Instead, a period of 45 minutes will be allocated to allowing members of the Council to ask oral questions to Cabinet members. Please can I remind members to only speak when I have invited them to do so, and to use the chat function and not to raise hands to indicate if they do wish to speak. Please do not use the chat for any other purpose other than requesting to speak, and please do not register to speak on agenda items in advance of that item commencing. The voting for agenda item 5 and 6 will be done by exception, and members wishing to express dissension from the recommendation should indicate in the chat bar. Voting for agenda items 7 and 8 will be done by roll call process. There will be a 10-minute break in the meeting at an appropriate time, and the meeting will conclude no later than 8:45. Can I ask the group business managers to advise if there are any further apologies for absence?
Councillor Marginton.
Councillor Marginton?
Yeah, can I give Councillor Munro's apologies for the meeting, and Councillors Eastwood and Councillor Anthony Smith will be joining the meeting later on.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Councillor Sokol.
Councillor Sokol? Councillor Sokol?
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Mayor, I was on mute. It's only two, Councillor Fazila Lunat and Councillor Nosheen Dodd, who are on maternity leave. But I believe if they want, they can log in anytime if they are available. But no other apology, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sokol. Councillor Richard, thank you very much for that. Item 3, I move that the minutes of the meeting held on 8 July 2020 be approved as a correct record. Is that seconded by Deputy Mayor?
Seconded.
Thank you. Can I have a show of hands? That's carried. Does any member wish to declare an interest in any of the agenda items?
Councillor Sokol's still got his hand up, but it could be just it's left it hanging.
Councillor Sokol? No, I think he's just left his hand up. Can I just remind members to complete and submit the declaration of interest form? What's that for? Okay. Item 5. Council is asked to consider the report of Members' Allowance Independent Review Panel. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Members, it's great to see you all, and I hope that you're all well. As you're no doubt aware from your papers, this is the Members' Allowances Independent Review Panel report, which was accepted by Corporate Governance and Audit Committee at our meeting on the 6th of March 2020, and thereby referred to the subsequent council, which of course was cancelled. So what you have in front of you now is the report as it was passed by the CGAC in March, and most importantly, that contains the full report of the Independent Review Panel and their decision. For what are obvious reasons, I think it's important that we don't set our own pay and we don't play politics or interfere in the work of the independent panel, who rightly come to the decision on matters of our pay rather than ourselves. So in light of that, I move that the recommendations are set out in the report of the Members' Allowances Independent Review Panel 2020-21 and the Members' Allowances Scheme for 2020-21 be approved.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Is that seconded? Councillor Kath Pinnick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Normally, the members of the second opposition party, the main opposition party, the second party of council, seconds these cross-party minutes and referrals to council. Unfortunately, there were no Conservatives attending the meeting of the Corporate Audit and Governance meeting in March. Consequently, I'm seconding the minutes and the approval of the conclusions of the meeting of the Corporate Audit and Governance about the Members' Allowance Independent Panel.
Thank you for that. The recommendation has been moved and seconded. Are there any comments? Councillor Lukage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank the panel for its work in the recommendations. Unfortunately, I feel the recommendations are no longer appropriate and think they've been overtaken by current events and the pandemic and don't reflect the realities of the situations our constituents are facing. So I don't personally feel it's appropriate for me to support the recommendations, although I normally would. Thank you.
Is there anybody else? No. Right. We will now move to the vote. All members in favour of the recommendation. If any members wish to dissent, please indicate dissension in the chat box.
Lukage is against.
Okay.
So Alison and Taylor have abstained.
So is that carried, yeah?
Yeah.
You're still carried.
Yeah, that is carried. Thank you. Item 6. Council is asked to approve the pay policy statement. Councillor Pando.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation as detailed in the policy statement attached in Appendix A1 of the report and ask Council to approve the report as is. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Pando. Is that seconded? Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Mayor. At this meeting of the Personnel Committee, I asked a question about the pay gap between the two extremes in our pay structure. I was reassured that the gap was in line with our statistical neighbours, which doesn't make it perfect, but it means that we're not lagging behind, which I was quite pleased with. It appears on page 31 of our pack and is shown as not having a policy. I can't help feeling, though, that there's a piece of work we could do here to re-examine that gap, especially now, and look to see if we can narrow it. If not in cash terms, then in working conditions and benefits and statuses. As we know, how we feel about where we work and where we live can sometimes offset how we feel about our incomes. I just think there's an opportunity to look at that balance. There's a people strategy refresh and staff wellbeing paper coming to corporate scrutiny tomorrow, which I'm hoping that will give some pointers in that work. I'm happy to second this for the same reasons that Councillor Pinnock seconded the previous item. Thank you.
Thank you. The recommendation has been approved and seconded. Are there any comments? No, there's nobody on. We will now move to the vote. Are all members in favour of the recommendation? If any members wish to dissent, please indicate dissension in the chat box. That's carried. Item 7. Council is asked to consider the report. Councillor Turner.
Mr. Mayor, thank you, and nice to see at least some of you on my screen. You're looking all very well and fine. Members, this is the Q1 financial update. As members will have noted, we are looking at a predicted overspend of 7.7 million on current estimates. However, traditionally, we have always had a predicted overspend at Q1. However, it's not usually just as much as this. But then we live in difficult and unpredictable times for local government finances. It's worth noting that 4.64 million of the predicted overspend is COVID-19 related. So in real terms, the predicted overspend is much lower than we usually see at Q1. I know that all officers and portfolio holders will be working very hard over the remaining months to ensure we deliver a financially neutral position by year end. Despite the many challenges we face due to COVID-19, we are in a very strong position financially due to the way we have carefully managed our finances over the last few years. The difficult decisions we took have enabled us to be able to continue with our ambitious capital plan and to deliver much needed services, despite the many challenges we face due to the current pandemic. Given the strong position this year, we're looking to strengthen parts of the council that have suffered from lack of capacity in recent years. This will help us to continue to deliver services and again our ambitious capital plan. Of course, it would be naive not to take into account the uncertainties that the coming months hold, and we have had to make many assumptions about the future in the report. But these are based on the best evidence available at the time the report was published. However, I can reassure members and the public that we are monitoring all our spending more closely than ever, whilst ensuring we keep the public safe and well, which has to be the priority for us. I genuinely welcome the much needed support that we have received so far from government, both directly to the council to support the council's activities and through the rates grant scheme, and also the discretionary fund that has enabled us to help local businesses. As we continue the fight against COVID-19, I don't want local government to slip down the pecking order of those who need financial support, and would just like to take this opportunity to remind government that we were told to do whatever it takes. I think they will need to come up with some more support in the coming months as the impact of the slowdown in the economy starts to become clearer and the effects on local government finances starts to increase. Local government and its officers, along with elected members, have been the forefront of leading the fight against COVID-19. We have been on the front line along with the NHS in keeping people safe and delivering much needed services and help to those who have needed it. However, this fantastic work does come at a cost, so we do need the financial support of government to ensure that this work continues, and also to deal with any possible wave that would appear to be developing as we speak. Of course, the real challenge will probably be next year's budget, and work has already started on preparing the budget process. And I've had many conversations with officers in advance of that budget process, looking at all the possible impacts on our finances. However, there are so many unknowns at the moment, so it's going to be a very challenging process here. But I have every faith in our elected members and officers, who I know will ensure we come up with a budget that delivers for our residents. Can I just thank all those officers who have done so much work in preparing this report in what are certainly unprecedented and difficult times for local government, and indeed for all of us sat here this evening, and for those at home watching EastEnders. Of course, other soaps are available. Mr. Mayor, I move that recommendations as set out at para 6, page 42, be approved.
Right, yeah.
Second, yeah?
Yeah.
Is that second?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, can I second this report and reserve the right to reply? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fondo. The recommendation has been moved and seconded. Are there any comments on this? Councillor Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Graham, I'm a little confused because you talked about Q1, but this is the outturn report. So I didn't know whether you were speaking to a different report, but I'll make my comments with regard to the report that I've got in front of me, which is the financial outturn and rollover report. So there's a number of comments really. I mean, I think the first one, and it kind of share with Graham's comments around recognising the work that has been put in by officers, and I think it's worth pulling out, for example, In terms of council tax income, we managed to achieve last year 99.6% of the expectation, which is an amazing performance given what was going on. And I think it's easy to overlook some of these things because we always tend to focus on the problems, but actually sometimes it's also worth just acknowledging the work that the finance team and the broader officer corps are doing to enable us to provide the finance for our residents in terms of the services we want to provide. I think the beginning of the report, and I know it's something we've talked about here at council, at cabinet, and in various scrutiny and other meetings, there is a lot of talk about the high needs, and this remains an ongoing problem. And I think we all recognise that. And whilst I welcome the additional £5.1 million that was given by the government towards our special needs, well, 6.1 if you count the £1 million that were given us each year extra, it's still an area where I think all of us across the political parties continue to need to work together to push for more funding to get ourselves into a position where there is adequate funding provided. And we don't have, I must confess, some of the ways in which the finance around this is managed and the reserves that are created and the deficits that are reported does tend to confuse me, but I know Eamon understands it. But I think it's an area where we can all together say to government that this is an area that needs adequate funding and will continue to be a challenge for us particularly, but I think it is nationally. I'd also just like to comment a little bit on the capital plan. So there is a revised capital plan produced in here on page 75, but even that is showing a significant uplift between the outturn in 2019-20, the expectation for 2021, the year we're currently in, and subsequent years, and I suspect that has already been overtaken by events. It suggested an uplift from circa 60 million, 600 million, I can't remember the numbers, to 170, and I suspect that's unlikely to be where we will end up given the delays and obvious slippage has been caused by COVID. So I look forward to seeing the Q1 report and the revisions that are probably associated with that. I also welcome additional funding in highways of around 3.8 million for potholes. So one would hope that we'll see some significant improvement in the state of some of our pothole roads. And then really just two questions, if I may, Graham. One, we do make reference about, and I know that we've debated this elsewhere and discussed this elsewhere, about capturing COVID-related costs and reporting those on a monthly basis to the government, which I know that every local authority has been asked to do. But are we also capturing COVID-related savings, not necessarily to report to the government, but just so that we know that finances, whatever money is given by the government, is always going to be tight? So are we looking at where there is flexibility within budgets that we're capturing that and perhaps moving it? So, for example, we may be seeing that there are reduced heating costs in some of our offices as a result of people people working from home. Now we're helping people with their costs elsewhere, but just, are we thinking about and capturing those? And then my second question, on page 71, it shows the variance on the play strategy, which it explains is slippage mainly due to Section 106 funding schemes, but it's almost 3/4 of the two-thirds, not 3/4. Can't do my maths. It's almost 2/3 of the anticipated spend has slipped. So it's just a question, really. I mean, do we need a bit of a deeper dive to have a look at what's happening with our play strategy capital plans? Because clearly you would expect it to. You will always expect.
Councillor Taylor, your time's up.
Okay, I'll finish that anyway. I think you got the point.
Thank you. Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll begin by stating the obvious and saying that this is an unusual time. It's an extraordinary time. It used to be that the worst and best case financial scenarios were known as the corridor of uncertainty, to borrow from cricket. I think we can quite safely say that that corridor has extended to the boundaries now. The fact that our Section 151 officer and his team have given us this report at all is a credit to them, and we thank them for it. I just have a couple of comments and observations. On the collection fund, I can see on page 53 at 1.8.2, we have a stunning 99.6% achieved on the planned income through council tax. Councillor Taylor mentioned this. I just want to know whether that planned income and the possible income were the same. I know they're not. Here, or was that against our own achievable target? The point being that if this is against our own target, it's going to take some careful thinking about what's possible in the near future in terms of targets. Now, as the economy becomes more turbulent, we will undoubtedly have more people getting into difficulty overpaying their council tax, with knock-on implications both for them personally, but also for the council's income and expenditure. In terms of the capital plan and rollover, many of the headline ambitions rely partly on borrowing, not solely. I know they come from a number of different pots, some grant borrowing, for example, some grant pots, for example. Of note is the report to corporate governance and audit on page 105, item 2.5, that highlights the raising by 1% of the rate of borrowing by the Public Works Loan Board. In itself, not a terrifying figure, but all of our borrowing has an impact on our revenue spend as we service ongoing debt. So we need to keep an eye on it. And as we see the economic impact of first COVID and then Brexit, we'll need to keep those plans in view with a lot more scrutiny, I feel. I know that debt profiling is fluid, and confidence seems to be pretty high that in-year spending will be manageable going forward in this year. But if we need to dip into reserves, we'll burn through them quick. And we may need to review council's plans to borrow in those large sums outlined in the plan. The importance of the comprehensive spending review can't be understated. We have had a lot of money unspent in ring-fenced budgets, but that will still need to be spent on recovery work, I feel. Money from government to contribute towards COVID spending is welcome, very welcome, but there's a shortfall in lots of different places. So with possibly more emergency expenditure to come, this could worsen quite quickly. I'll finish on a question though. On page 55 of the report pack at the end of 1.10.8, there's a reference to uncommitted capital budgets no longer required. Now, I ask, is there any left for a skate park to replace the one at Spenpool? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Can I have Councillor David Hall?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to start from the revenue point of view, it is pleasing that the revenue accounts come in on target. And as other speakers have said, we've got to always remember that these figures which the council sets every year have to be translated into services and actions by officers, so we should thank them for that work. A couple of things which, from my reading of the report, we really have to keep an eye on. The first is the overspending in the Economy and Infrastructure Directorate, which is a culmination of several different things, but was about £5 million, and we really need to keep an eye on that. And then one or two of the planned savings which didn't come to fruition, such as in planning and public health. So we really need to watch on those, and I look forward to seeing the next lot of figures. Councillor Turner is right to say the government has stated they'll provide whatever it takes. I'm pleased that so far they have been giving us the money to help, and I would expect them to pass that on in full. Indeed, we've got a commitment to that from the Secretary of State. And again, thanks to finance officers who have doled out an awful lot of government money in this time, and they've been working weekends and they've really gone the extra mile. So I take my hat off to them. Just an issue on car parking income, which is down 1.4 million. Now, remember, apart from 2 weeks at the end, this is all pre-COVID. And I think that tells us that it's time we had an open and honest appraisal of what we actually aim to achieve by charging for parking. I think there was supposed to have been a review last year, but I'm not sure whether it ever came about. But an ideal time would be to do it before the next budget, because it should be becoming apparent by then what state our town centres will be in, and we really need to demate that. On the capital front, the recommendation to support the rollover and the revised capital programme, Well, we will support this because the investment is badly needed, but I do have a couple of reservations. Firstly, is to note, following from Councillor Taylor's comments, that ambition is always a good thing, but it's always got to be tempered with pragmatism. Is it conceivable that we will spend around £200 million this year on capital projects, given that we only managed 81 million last year? And also given that halfway through the year, according to the last capital monitoring report received at Cabinet last week, we'd only spent 8.5 million of that £200 million. Now, I'm not saying that's surprising, it isn't, because of what's happened with COVID, but that leads to a second reservation, which is to whether actually all of our capital schemes are going to remain fit for purpose in a post-COVID Kirklees. So my first question to Graham is that would he and the Cabinet consider a further revision of the capital plan in the near future? A final issue in the recommendations is for the delegation of authority to the Children's Services Director in consultation with the portfolio holder to identify properties to purchase for children's homes. Again, I would support this, but could we please have an assurance that ward members will be consulted? Many of the smaller home sites are perfectly acceptable and workable, but unfortunately we have found that there are some that are not, and this could possibly be avoided by consultation with ward members in advance. So broadly, yes, we support the recommendations, and I await an answer to those couple of questions that I've raised. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Andrew Cooper.
Yeah, thanks for all the work that's gone on in this report, and I do know that the General Fund has come in pretty much on target, which is welcome, and it's good, particularly in the extraordinary times that we face. I think, though, it is worth us looking under the headline figure and looking at the variances from each of the services, because sometimes you land on a sixpence and it's luck, sometimes it's by design, and so I think we can sort of see here that there is, it's good that we have ended up in the right place, but there are some variances under the surface that could be informative and could help us look at figures in a bit more detail. I also want to talk about car parking. It's been mentioned by Councillor Hall, and my experience in Huddersfield Town Centre is that basically it's possibly not shoppers who are actually parking Huddersfield Town Centre. That it's probably actually staff and the few people who are actually commuting. And so I know that the rationale behind getting rid of the parking charges was to boost the town centre, but is that what it's actually doing? And I think certainly makes sense to have car parks outside the town centre free around Springwood and those sort of areas. Apologies to North Kirklees members here. But within the town centre itself, I think there's probably an argument, not so much to get the council revenue, but to ensure that there is churn within the town centre and that so parkers can park. And also blue badge holders as well. Blue badge holders are finding it extremely difficult to be able to park in the town centre, to be able to get the services that they need, often chemist services and things such as that. So I think we do need to urgently review our car parking charges quickly, because I think as we approach Christmas, we've got to ask ourselves, are we really helping the town centre by not having those parking charges?
Thank you, Councillor Pandor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Are you gonna second this, Councillor Pandor?
Yes, I'm going to second it, Mr. Mayor. I thought I did, but obviously my memory is fading me. I second that, Mr. Mayor. I thought I already did. I'm sure I did.
Yeah, you did. I think.
Yeah, yes. I'm just using my right to reply.
Yeah.
You got me going there because I'm thinking, am I losing my marbles? Sitting on my desk, zooming, right, is not good for my health.
Is that a question for us all to answer?
I lost my marbles. Anyway, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. Firstly, I'd like to thank all our brilliant staff, Eamon and his team, and to our great portfolio holder, Councillor Graham Turner, to actually get the budget on target and within the parameters. Obviously, it's going to be a turbulent next few months, probably going to next year. But I just want to quickly reflect on one or two things that we are doing, and I think Councillor John Taylor highlighted a key issue regarding the underfunding of local government. Since 2010, there's been around £15 billion that's been cut out of local government. And on the back of that, we are actually now developing an investment budget, and that's what we're hopefully going to be continuing with. Councillor David Hall mentioned quite rightly that we have been given an undertaking by Robert Jenrick that he will make sure that any issues that arise from COVID-19, any resources that are not meeting our expectations in terms of addressing the pandemic, he will meet, and so far it's positive. I hope that they continue in that spirit. On a wide issue, the LGA, James Jamieson, he actually announced a few months ago that there's a crisis looming, as always, within local government finances. By 2025, there will be a £6.5 billion shortfall. Adult social care, always the poor relation, around £3.9 billion. Children's services, 1.57 billion, and other services, 0.9 billion. And we can't carry on cutting the place-based stuff to pay for the children's services and adult social care, which is quite important. So we will continue to lobby on a cross-party basis to the LGA, and there is a spending review that's coming up. I'm hoping that there'll be a lot of need-based formulas that go back in, rather than a blanket policy of devising the budget on a per capita basis. There needs to be a formula that reflects the needs of communities in there, and we will continue to lobby for that at an LGA level to the government. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Viv Kendrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to comment really around some of the children's services issues. Like Councillor Taylor, I am concerned about the funding for learning for high needs. And by this, we're talking about children who have challenges, have educational, health and care plans. And over 4 years, we had an increase of 44% of those applications. Between 2018, 2019, it's gone up another 21%. And the government is being very clear with us, as it has with other councils, that we've been underfunded to the tune at the last look of £7 million. But they aren't giving us £7 million. They're giving us £1 million a year for 7 years. And actually, the challenge and the demand for support for these children continues to rise. And my concern is, whilst we have this additional money that was referred to, we really are running behind the ball, if you like, and we ought to be having the funding that we were, it's been decided that we needed long ago. We ought to be having it now. And this was decided long before COVID. It wasn't when the government was under huge financial pressures, which I do accept it is now. But I really am concerned at how we can continue to provide well and adequately for these children while we don't get the funds until finally 7 years down the line. Doesn't seem reasonable or fair. That's all I wanted to say, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Marchington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just to pick up on the general point that a number of councillors made about local government finance. And COVID has highlighted the pressures that local government budgets are under. Appreciate, obviously, over the years, the work that the Local Government Association has done. But we really do need to start thinking long term about how local services are financed. I mean, some of the lessons that we learned from Democracy Commission is that around the world, from the United States, in Europe, in Australasia, how much more control that local authorities have over local budgets. One of the positives out of COVID is actually the better engagement councils had with local businesses. That's been about providing support to those businesses, but we've got a lot of intelligence out of that. The sad thing is that we're having to rely on handouts from central government to be able to do that. And if we had a better understanding of our local economy and how that works, and more opportunity to influence that economy, then we'd be in a much better position. And we see that. So, and again, it could be around children's services. Viv's highlighted that, you know, pressures on the budgets. You know, the only way we can sort that out is to ask for more money from central government, and even the greater term problem with adult social care. So, one of the things I think any of us who have any influence of what happens with the central government is to, and we've seen how government can, in a difficult situation, access huge amounts of money, and that money could be used after COVID to put to the economy of the UK from, you know, across the whole of the country, and particularly for our residents in Kirklees, on a much better footing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bolt.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I just echo Councillor Hall's comments about the prospect for a review of car parking provision and operation? It's right that we look not only at this from the revenue generation point of view, but also we need to see if there is a contradiction in the stance of the Cabinet, who at West Yorkshire levels are supporting targets to reduce private car journeys by 21%, to increase bus journeys by 39%, and increase rail travel by 53%, but on a local level at Kirklees have requisitioned prime land in Huddersfield for a car park, whilst acknowledging that revenue is falling from car parks. So how is that fiscally sound? And is it something that we should be doing in this day and age? So perhaps the review is called for. And Councillor Turner indeed mentioned difficult and unprecedented times. And many residents who I spoke to would concur with that it is indeed difficult and unprecedented to be spending millions of pounds acquiring buildings when you have no publicly available business plan on which the ratepayers can have confidence that there's going to be a return on that investment. So I think there's two elements there that do need some scrutiny, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think we've got no further speakers, so we will now move to the vote. Is the rollover one?
Okay, members, if I can remind you to unmute your...
Does Graham get a right to reply? Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, there's no right to reply.
Oh, there is. Yeah.
Is there?
Yeah.
Why is it's not on the script?
Just 1 minute, Councillor Pando. Are we?
Yeah, right to reply.
Yeah?
Yes, right.
Yeah, carry on, Councillor Pando. Sorry about that.
Sorry, point of order, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Pando has used his right of reply earlier on. When you asked if he was seconding, he actually said he was using his right of reply. And it seems like there's more than he's using his mouth in more than one occasion.
Councillor Watt, we apologise for that. It's Councillor Turner who's got the right to reply.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, thank you. There's quite a few points there, so I'll pick up as many as I can. I think the one that Councillor Kendrick referred to is high needs, and Councillor Taylor. It's well documented that high needs across the country, and it's not just us, is generally underfunded at the moment. And when the last review was, we came out about the second worst, and that's why the government recognises we needed about 7 million more money, £7 million more. But they did put that in, as Councillor Kendrick pointed out, as 1 million per year for the 7 years. We are carrying a structural deficit on that, and we're just rolling that forward. But it will need addressing at some point. We cannot continually roll forward a structural deficit on that. And hopefully, with the spending review this autumn, the Chancellor will recognise that and fund the high needs correctly, not just for us, but for the entire nation. It is a problem, and these people need and absolutely deserve our help and support. I car parking seems to be a bit of an issue there, and you probably need to speak to the relevant portfolio holder about how the review is going, whether they've changed the terms of reference to that with the current COVID, and whether they're going to look through it through a slightly different lens now. The collection fund, it is high. It is obviously a target we set ourselves, because we wouldn't we? But having said that, over the last good few years now, we have spent an awful lot of time and effort pushing people towards direct debit. I'm not ashamed to say that helps them budget. It helps us budget, and it means we guarantee payment. And we had a policy when anybody rung up to ask about council tax or whatever, we say, "Oh, have you thought about direct debit?" So we've driven the level of direct debits up hugely, and that's probably one of the reasons why the council tax collection fund is so high. And I can't remember, somebody picked up the point that whether that'll be the same going forward as unemployment and the economy starts to take a downturn is anybody's guess, but it'll probably start to slip, I would think. But it is something we constantly keep an eye on that one. Somebody mentioned about the Public Works Loan Board, about the 1% increase. That came in some time ago now, and it was literally overnight. One day it was one figure, and the day after there'd been a 1% increase. And in some ways, and depending on the level of money you want to borrow and the terms and conditions, it is actually cheaper to go to the market now than the PWLB. So we do look at that, and where we need to, we will go out, borrow externally. I know it was a problem for not only ourselves, again, other councils have spoke to other members from other councils, and they were shocked that it went up literally overnight, and a lot of them looked to borrow from alternative markets, and actually what it did is it dropped the money down significantly that were being borrowed from government, so it had an impact on the government's budget. So hopefully they'll look at their rates and bring them more in line with what's commercially available, because it's much better to borrow from them than commercial organisations. So, but that again is something we know about, something we kept a close eye on. COVID costs, yes, we're aware of the costs and the savings. We're keeping an eye on the savings, but I think I've said this before, the savings are likely to be marginal, around, pretty much around there. There won't be any huge masses of millions of savings. There will be some, absolutely, but we will keep an eye on. But as I say, perhaps not as much as we would anticipate, because we are keeping the offices open, because there are some people do have to be in the offices, so some of that is covered by that. I know David and I have talked about, David Hall, Councillor Hall, discussed the capital plan, and it is ambitious, David, you're absolutely right. But one of the things I mentioned, we are looking to strengthen parts of the organisation that's been a little bit weak due to being unable to employ sufficient staff, because we're not quite able to compete with the private sector, but we're hoping to employ more people in those sectors, and those are the areas that will help us drive the capital plan forward. So yes, we're on top of it. And it is ambitious, and it's right to be ambitious, especially in these difficult times. Let's try and drive the local economy forward. So we're going to do all we can to make great strides in that. And we have 2 new directors coming into the organisation in the next couple of weeks. One starts tomorrow, actually, and I'm sure that they're going to come in and push these projects and bring their enthusiasm and ambition to Kirklees. That's the reason we employed them. So I'm looking for great things this year through the capital plan. John, about your skate park, I don't know, speak to the relevant portfolio holder. And I think that's pretty much all the points I picked up. Okay, thank you very much.
We now move to the vote.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Members, if I could remind you to unmute as we're voting, please. If you could indicate for, against or abstain. Councillor Pandor?
For.
Councillor David Hall?
For.
Councillor Lawson?
Abstain.
Councillor Cooper?
For.
Councillor Greaves?
For.
Councillor Ahmed?
For.
Councillor Akhtar? Councillor Akhtar? Councillor Allison?
For.
Councillor Armour?
For.
Councillor Asif?
For.
Councillor Bellamy? Councillor Bellamy, Councillor Bolt,
For.
Councillor Burke,
Abstain.
Councillor Butt,
For.
Councillor Paula Davis,
Abstain.
Councillor Paul Davis,
For.
Councillor Eastwood, Councillor Eastwood, Councillor Donald Firth,
For.
Councillor Eric Firth,
For.
Councillor Goodwin,
For.
Councillor Granger Mead,
For.
Councillor Steve Hall,
For.
Councillor Holmes,
For.
Councillor Hill,
For.
Councillor Homewood,
For.
Councillor Hussain, the Mayor,
For.
Councillor Yusra Hussain,
For.
Councillor Iredale, Councillor Iredale, Councillor Korshik,
For.
Councillor Kendrick,
For.
Councillor Khan,
For.
Councillor Lees Hamilton,
For.
Councillor Lee Richards,
For.
Councillor Lowe,
For.
Councillor Lukic,
For.
Councillor Lyons,
For.
Councillor Marchington,
Abstain.
Councillor Mather,
For.
Councillor McBride,
For.
Councillor McGuinn,
For.
Councillor Murgatroyd,
For.
Councillor O'Donovan,
For.
Councillor Patrick,
For.
Councillor Patterson,
For.
Councillor Pervez,
For.
Councillor Amanda Pinnock,
For.
Councillor Andrew Pinnock,
Abstain.
Councillor Kath Pinnock,
Abstain.
Councillor Sarwar,
For.
Councillor Scott,
For.
Councillor Simpson,
For.
Councillor Smage,
For.
Councillor Anthony Smith,
Abstain.
Councillor Richard Smith,
For.
Councillor Sokol,
For.
Councillor John Taylor,
For.
Councillor Kath Taylor,
For.
Councillor Thompson,
For.
Councillor Turner,
For.
Councillor Uller,
For.
Councillor Uppal,
For.
Councillor Walker,
For.
Councillor Warner,
For.
Councillor Watson,
For.
Councillor White,
For.
and Councillor Zaman.
For.
Thank you. That's carried, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, that's carried. So can you all go back to your mutes, please? Put mute on your, so we don't get the disturbance when somebody's speaking. Thank you. So we're going to item 8. Council is asked to consider the report. Councillor Pando.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, this is a long-awaited process and a formal report after the consultation has been carried out with a view to having a combined authority in next May, after next May's election. Just to provide a bit of a contextual background, a historical background, consecutive governments since at least 2000 have actually tried to crack this nut. Tony Blair's government got the concept of directly elected mayors, and then that then moved on during the 2012 coalition government, where a move to actually trying to get infrastructure development increased came through the city deal, and that's what we have at the moment in terms of the mayoral combined authority with its detailed complexities regarding who's in and who's not, if you look at it from a point of view or a city region point of view. 2014, George Osborne, the then Chancellor, said that the way forward would be to actually equalise nationally the North-South divide, and one way he tried to do that was to develop the concept of Northern Powerhouse. and he actually then started to develop the idea of elected mayors to actually start to put some investment back in the north of England. One of the key factors that you need to understand is Leeds as a city region, its economic base is bigger than Wales. So you can see that, you know, we actually have got a lot of economic potential, and not just that, but there's also a lot of economic activity. If you look at the home nations where devolution has taken place, and this hopefully will be a building bridge towards that. In 2016, legislation was further passed for combined authority mayors, and we've seen a number of devolved administrations up and down the country. Having said that, Leeds City Region, Leeds as a core city is the only core city who hasn't had a devolution deal up to date. 2019, December 2019, Boris Johnson in his pre-election campaign manifesto quite rightly said that, you know, we need to actually level up, and I'm pleased that, you know, he actually put his money where his mouth is, and you know, we saw at very fast pace and speed that promise being fulfilled within a matter of months, and I was really pleased for that. You're probably aware, Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor at the moment, he came up north after Boris Johnson declared the levelling up in Rotherham, and we then signed in principle a mayoral devolution deal. And that is the priority, and that is the priority hopefully for all of us. That was a priority for government, and I hope that still remains our priority. The timescales and the roadmap is very clear, and despite the pandemic, I'm really pleased that the government is fully committed behind this. Consultation was delayed, but it went back on target. They extended the time frame. And they actually put a lot of effort behind the consultations. It's just important to note, Mr. Mayor, that the other mayoral combined authorities, the consultations that took place was primarily online, and we need to understand that, you know, that the consultation, no fault of anybody, was online. But having said that, the responses we got, some would argue that they're not great, but it was the biggest ever consultation, and the feedback since all the regions went down the same road. You know, we had 4 times as many responses to our consultation as did Sheffield City Region. I'm sure members will have a view on that, but I still think that, you know, it is excellent in terms of the amount of responses we got. 67% actually were in favour of that. That's not to say that the remainder 33% were against that. It's more complex than that, because there were questions, there were queries, there were details being asked for in terms of what it means. So don't think that it was just 33% against. It's a lot more complex than that. However, the silent majority who did not take part, which are hundreds of thousands, will benefit. They'll benefit from improved transport, benefit from better skills and employment, better housing and planning. And we also managed to get the Police and Crime Commissioner part of the devolution deal. Members will know if we did have an election this May gone, we would not have the combined authority in charge of the Police and Crime Commissioner. Through this council, through the consultation, many members said that it only makes sense to actually bring in the PCC at this moment in time, which we have done. So the Police and Crime Commissioner's functions will also come within the remit of the Mayor come May 2021. Like I said, this is probably the best deal that the government has done, and I'm really pleased that the government did listen, and they are still very committed behind this, and I commend them for that. Just to recap, I'm sure many of you know, £38 million year on year over the next 30 years, a West Yorkshire Investment Fund. We'll have access to a 5-year programme for mass transit schemes, a £4.2 billion. If we didn't go for the mayoral combined authority, we would have to bid into that process, and there will be no guarantees. With this deal, hopefully once it goes through to May, that will be a lot easier, and the reality of having a mass transit system for West Yorkshire will be a lot more of a reality. £317 million from Transforming City Fund, and again, I think the cross-party nature of our working ensured that we actually got the higher scenario in terms of where we want to spend that money. Also, there's a £25 million budget that's been approved to develop a British library for the North. Flood defence is a massive issue. We'll get another additional £101 million for our flood defences. Adult education is really a key priority, especially now on the back of the pandemic. So that will allow us to access £63 million to actually have our own destiny on an annual basis to develop our adult education programme. We already have a good offer, and we need to make sure that that offer is actually improved even more. And what we plan to do is increase the baseline of the other authorities that aren't as good as us. So hopefully that will be a plus for us. And a £3.2 million for a programme to develop a forward programme, pipeline schemes for housing sites. So, you know, the deal is really good. Obviously, some would argue that, you know, we need a lot more. I'm sure, you know, there's a case for that. We made the case, but at least we've got something that is looking forward and moving on. You're probably all aware that the aspiration for all Yorkshire folk like me and thee is to have one Yorkshire, and that's not gone away. Boris Johnson, when he came up to Rotherham in 2019, just before Christmas, he said that he will still have a Yorkshire committee, and I'm really pleased that they've actually supported that by putting in £200,000 to carry on that Yorkshire Leaders working group, so we can actually start to actually innovate and sell the idea for one Yorkshire, and hopefully one day, maybe in my generation, maybe not in my generation, but we may see a one Yorkshire devolved deal that will then well and truly punch beyond all the home nations and will really truly be on the international map. This is the first report. This report is really about the feedback for the consultation, and there will be another report that will come to council in November, which will then allow the drafting of the orders to pave way for legislation and pave way for a mayoral combined authority to take place come May 2021. A few issues have risen across the region, namely around the regional spatial strategy. Let me assure all members that if there are plans afoot to put in big infrastructure projects around planning, we will have a right of veto. And if any authority does not agree with that regional spatial strategy, then it won't go ahead. Whatever the mayor does, we will make sure that the mayor is held to account, and the mayor will not be able to operate unless he or she gets the full commitment of all the 5 West Yorkshire authorities. So this is our opportunity. This is our opportunity to grasp the nettle, grasp the budget, and you know, let's go ahead and let's make sure that, you know, we actually deliver for our great West Yorkshire folk. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll probably come back in at the end. Thank you.
Councillor Pando, are you moving that? Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm moving that, and I think Peter McBride is seconding it.
Councillor McBride. Councillor McBride, are you seconding this?
Thank you. Yes, I am. Thank you. This is the culmination of an epic journey to establish a mayor within a geography acceptable to the Conservative Party in Yorkshire. For our part, we've accepted an offer we couldn't refuse without excluding West Yorkshire from capital investment for decades. In these circumstances, Labour leaders have accepted the inevitable. The public response to this form of consultation has been, to say the least, limited. However, we wish the Mayor well in his or her challenge to coordinate strategies for transport, housing, planning, policing and regeneration, working with district leaders in West Yorkshire. Personally, I hope that this is a stepping stone to the creation of a regional assembly when the exercise of these massive powers will be exercised by an accountable body with time and powers to give these matters adequate consideration. If such a body covered all of Yorkshire, a concept with which people clearly identify, it would represent the same number of people as those in Scotland. Surely Yorkshire people could at least be as good do as good a job as the Scots and bring our tiers of government in line with the majority of Europe. Powerful elected regional bodies are the most effective defence against an elected dictatorship. Never was there a more important time to establish this principle, and unfortunately, that would have brought us in line with European practice, and we've seen the benefits that have accrued for both France and Germany for adopting such a system. But hopefully, this may be a stepping stone. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cooper.
He's on mute. You need to unmute him.
Ask him to unmute.
Councillor Cooper, can you mute? Unmute, sorry.
Can someone help him?
Councillor Cooper, you're still muted.
I know. Sorry, I didn't realise I was muted. Okay. So here we are, the so-called devolution deal, the take it or leave it deal, the only game in town deal, the deal or no deal deal. The elected mayor does not represent real devolution. It is simply replacing a remote Westminster politician with a remote individual who is somehow supposed to represent 2.3 million people, which they simply cannot. When mayoral models have been put before local people in referenda before, they have been rejected. Now it is proposed to impose a mayor on the whole of West Yorkshire without a referendum. It could have been so much better. In London, to get the mayor's budget passed, he has to get the support of the Greater London Assembly, which is elected by proportional representation, fair votes. In place of an elected assembly, we have a collection of mainly council leaders on the mayoral combined authority. It's not exactly a decision by smoke-filled room, but it's not that far off. Greens have consistently asked for decisions like the mayor's budget, the use of compulsory purchase and mayoral development powers to be subject to the approval of full council, not just the cabinet. So you will all have a vote. That has been rejected. As a Green Party councillor, I'm a member of the Local Government Association Independent Group, along with independent councillors. In West Yorkshire, we make up 8% of elected members, yet it looks like under these proposed arrangements, we will not be represented on the mayoral combined authority, and neither will the voters we represent. Following their election, the mayor appoints a deputy, usually some party worthy on a whopping salary, hardly democratic, and there will also be a police and crime commissioner deputy, again an appointee. Now, I'm not a big fan of the current police and crime commissioner system, but at least he is elected. Under the new arrangements, they would not be. The West Yorkshire Authority's governance review document that made the case for a mayoral combined authority highlights the major challenges to the sub-region. It includes growth, productivity, diversity, innovation and trade, but climate change is not identified as a challenge, bizarrely. The Leeds City region target of having a zero carbon economy in just 18 years' time is a significant challenge, but it is concerning that it has not been included here. And for the record, the Green Party believes that our target should be 2030 and not 2038, in line with the evidence from climate scientists. In our view, this is only partial devolution to effectively an elected dictatorship and not a proper democratic body. The area covered, the county of West Yorkshire is a failed concept of the early 1970s and does not even cover the economic footprint of the Leeds City region. To have real devolution, we need an assembly and a First Minister with powers similar to those granted to Scotland, but based upon the region of Yorkshire, which has the same population. The proposal states that agreement is the first step in the process to further devolution. Therefore, a Yorkshire Assembly should be seen as an assumed next step and should be included in this devolution agreement. So, as we're not to be included as members of the mayoral combined authority, we will abstain on this vote, as did our Green colleagues on Leeds and Bradford councils. Under these proposed arrangements, the only way to have our views and opinions represented would be to elect a Green mayor for West Yorkshire, and that is our aim. Thank you.
Councillor Lawson, can you unmute, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Again, for the record, Kirklees Liberal Democrats are ardent supporters of devolution to power to the most local level, always have been. We believe that our communities know what will work in their area and what won't. And we believe that those voices need to be heard when decisions are being made that affect them. A West Yorkshire regional mayor offers none of that. In fact, the opposite is on offer. We have a top-down structure imposed on us from central government in a last-minute rushed like-it-or-lump-it deal. A deal that spreads not very much money thinly and unevenly across the region. From my reading, there will be no representation to the Mayor's Board of Appointees by communities or their representatives other than through the leader of a council. That's not devolution. That's the relocation of central powers. A democratic deficit is built into the DNA of these proposals. The results of the consultation are in front of us, over 200 pages of not very much. I thank the officers for compiling it and printing it and getting it to us, but it's the content that's in question. 4,317. That's the number that I could discover. The number of respondents to the consultation. 5 boroughs. That's over 2 million people. It's a fraction of 1%. But in cabinet, we were being told that by the leader, that this was a good response, a great response, in relation to other mayoral consultations. He sees a great response. I see a pattern of antipathy towards mayoral regions. Even on such low responses, things are being read into the numbers, like 2/3 responded positively. Well, I'd say that 2/3 of not very much to start with is precious little to be making decisions on conferring powers to a mayor that will ultimately be able to deal with transport, skills and employment, planning, crime and finance. This group has not offered an amendment, as I'm aware that others have in the region, as we think that the plan is fundamentally flawed. It takes decision-making in precisely the wrong direction when, at a time like never before, we need accountability and openness. If other groups are minded to send on this consultation, ask also that we look again at the Yorkshire-wide deal with proper democratic mechanisms that don't lift democracy out of people's reach, and give it some meaningful cash whilst you're in there. Oh, and if this new mayor can raise precepts, ask what they're going to spend it on. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Marchington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Following on from comments by Councillor Lawson, believe as Liberal Democrats that devolution is vitally important. We live in one of the most centralised countries on the planet, and we've seen time and time again how areas which have more control, more say of what happens locally, do much better. The classic example is you're looking in Germany at the moment, how they've dealt with the COVID epidemic. It's on a regional basis, it's on a local basis. You've got track and trace. And we're pleased to see on a West Yorkshire level that we wanted to do that, but you've not got the resources. You're relying on central government time and time again. This isn't devolution. It feels like delegation. It feels like Westminster passing the buck to a local elected mayor, which we do not want. Most of it don't. We've had referendums before. Kirklees had a referendum about this. We don't want an elected mayor. And it's, the question we might ask is, any deal better than no deal? And I'm certainly not convinced that. I don't think our group is convinced about that either. There needs to be a root and branch review of government in this country. We see in Northern Ireland, in Wales, in Scotland, devolved assembly, devolved powers, and I don't think it's perfect, but it actually, you see much better buy-in to what's happening in those areas. Again, I think councils across groups have talked about one Yorkshire deal. We need to be heading towards that. So the question is, do we support this or not? It's wonderful to hear Peter speaking about this and Peter's qualified comments. I'd never put you down as an optimist, Peter, but you're saying about this being a stepping stone towards a regional assembly. I'm not that optimistic about that. I think it'll be something to, I don't think it's a stepping stone in that direction. I can't see at the moment any Westminster style government giving the people of Yorkshire the say over what they've over the things that issue them, that's of most issue them to most. I think Councillor Lawson had a really good comment about this, not necessarily today, but in other places, about a worry about powers that Kirklees. We've talked about planning. So planning powers that Kirklees has at the moment will be not devolved, but taken up to an elected mayor, and it feels like a re-centralisation, not a decentralisation, and that's surely not right. I'm not convinced. I mean, I'm not convinced it's going to be a good deal for Kirklees, but also the people that I represent in the villages within the Goker ward. What, you know, will it work for them? I don't think it's going to work for Goker. I don't think it's going to work for Milnsridge. I don't think it's going to work for Longwood. I don't think it's going to work for Cowlersley, because the decision making is too far remote. You're going to be having people making decisions who haven't heard of those places, who haven't got an interest in it, and there's no, as other councillors have said, the governance structures that are in place, you're not going to get that voice coming through. You're going to get decisions made that are neither going to be strategic, nor are they going to work on the ground. We used to have 50 years ago the equivalent of a combined authority. It was the West Riding County Council. It was an authority that did excellent infrastructure projects. It's an authority that built schools. It had world-class schools. It had a world-class education system. Those powers have been removed from us, and there's none of that's coming back under this deal. We had local authorities such as Huddersfield Corporation, who built its own local transport network. It funded that locally. It was paid for by local people. We used to have those powers, and those are the sorts of powers that ought to come back, where we've got people elected locally who are accountable locally, who can speak to and talk to, and they can feed in the cares and concerns of local people and make decisions on that basis. It's happened in the past. That's the sort of thing we ought to go, we ought to be looking to return to, and then actually looking around the world about the best models of local government, about how local communities can thrive, and taking up some of those ideas as well. Ideas that are much better examples of devolution than this is. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor David Hall, on mute, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've heard a few contributions now to the debate who have raised objections to some part of the deal, and I would agree it's not a perfect deal, and that's because it's the product of negotiation. In this instance, between council leaders who are at the moment Labour and a Conservative government, and that's bound to be the case. But unfortunately, now's not really the right time to be debating the content of the deal, because that was the purpose of the consultation, to which I'm sure they've responded. The paper before us deals with the consultation responses and Cabinet decision last week to send them to the Secretary of State, and that's a matter of process, and as such I have no problem with that part of it. It is worth noting, however, that the response rate was barely 1 in every 500 people from the county, which is hardly a resounding success, although I suppose it's obvious to us that most people will have more immediate matters on their minds in the past few months. Our report to Council before us recommends that we consider, comment and endorse the Cabinet decision. And this is where I do have a little problem, because the Kirklees Constitution states that this matter is a Cabinet decision, and we've got to live with that. But on a matter of such importance, I do feel that all members should be allowed a say at every stage in the process. The whole paper, in my view, should have come to Council before Cabinet, and that would have been the correct way to do this. In that way, all councillors could have put their views forward and all opinions would have been considered by the Cabinet at the time. As it is, the decision has already been made by Cabinet, and Kirklees' consent has therefore already been given for the combined authority to send the consultation summary to the Secretary of State. So, in other words, our consideration, comments and endorsement today are entirely redundant. Having said that, I'm still of the opinion that broadly this devolution deal will be of benefit to residents of West Yorkshire. Financially, it is a very good deal for Kirklees and for the county, and as such, I won't vote against this. Boris is serious about levelling up in the north, and I've had that from the horse's mouth. But I am gravely concerned that, given the timescales as detailed in the report, the next stages of council involvement will be similarly truncated and devoid of scrutiny, and that most councillors will be bypassed again. And this state of affairs does damage local democracy, which is the very thing that we are trying to protect after all. As a council, I would suggest that we ensure with our counterparts across the county that before the next stages of the process, that is the final endorsements of the deal, all councillors have the opportunity to express their views, and that the decisions made then shall be subject to the full scrutiny process. And to me, if the consequences of greater participation and scrutiny by councillors and by the public is that the election of a new mayor of West Yorkshire slips into 2022, then so be it. But let's use the short time we have now to continue to lobby for the things we feel are important, either things in the deal or things we wish were different in the deal. For instance, I shall still be pressing for the deletion of the deputy mayor posts, for instance. And crucially, let's ensure that Kirklees punches above its weight in the new combined authority. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor P. Davis. On mute, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a brief comment to add to this. I just want to say that I don't think it is a good deal for local people. And that's evidenced by the lack of response to the consultation shows that people aren't engaging in the process already. Adding more tiers of government does nothing to increase the representation of the people in my ward or to drive their engagement in the decision making locally. It won't bring more funding. It will just mean that decisions about spending that funding is taken further from those closest to where those decisions have the most information and are more better made. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor McBride. Can you unmute, please?
You've spoken already.
I've spoken.
Oh, his name's there.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rob Walker.
Right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have already supported this report in Cabinet and I will endorse the report today, but I have some really quite serious reservations, much of which follow on the points that were made very eloquently earlier by Councillor McBride. I've also a lot of sympathy for comments that have been made by other people from the Green Party and from the Liberal Democrats. I think it was described in a paper as one of the local papers as mafia politics. I think this is an offer that we've had to accept or face the alternative of a financial punishment beating. And that's really why I've supported this, because I feel that if we don't do that, then we will be financially penalised by this government. There are two main problems. The first really is the problem of the democratic deficit, which I think a number of people have already described the problem very clearly. I also believe that we should have some form of elected assembly. I think this is just really a fig leaf for growing centralisation, and I think it goes along with other measures that are being brought in at the moment, such as the gerrymandered reorganisation of local government and the changes that are being made, or at least put forward for consultation at the moment, to the planning proposal. I'm a supporter of devolution. I don't think this is real devolution. I think we've got one of the most highly centralised political systems and economies in the Western world, and I don't think this is going to reverse that. I also think it's not really going to begin to address deep-seated regional inequalities. Interesting that Councillor Hall has put his trust in Mr. Johnson. I hope this is not betrayed. Looking at his track record in terms of delivering on his promises, I wouldn't be too hopeful. I think in terms of inequalities, they're right across the board: economic, our health inequalities, educational inequalities, transport inequalities, cultural spending inequalities. Are those going to be addressed? I don't really see the evidence from this deal that that is the case. It's too little, too late as well. I hope going forward that we will have to work hard to make the best of what is a bad job. But I hope that in the future, we will have a government with a genuine commitment to devolution and a genuine commitment to decentralising our state and our economy. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Andrew Pinnick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think my advice to Councillor Walker is don't hold your breath, because I'm not sure that that any of that is going to happen. My question is this a good thing? Just because it's a deal and it's there doesn't mean to say that it's good. And I am pathologically opposed to the idea of putting power as indicated in the hands of one person, and it is not clear exactly what happens lower down the scale. And it's already been mentioned this thing about deputies, but we've seen in relation to deputies for the Police and Crime Commissioner, for instance, that you get appointed people who are friends of the incumbent or appear to be so. And the other worrying thing about this is this could lead to an erosion of the role of Kirklees Council, along with the other councils in West Yorkshire. And somebody I heard once described will end up by being glorified parish councils if most of our powers are taken away by a body. No, the democratic deficit that this underlines, and very seriously underlines, can only be put right by having a regional assembly. And various people have mentioned this. And I think that whilst not being ideal, it will at least give a democratic connection between the people on the ground, and one or two councillors have mentioned issues in their own wards, between those people and those at the top. Whereas in this case, even if the person is elected, it still doesn't make them any less remote. And that is what is particularly worrying. The consultation is, I think, perfunctory. I know it was done by Ipsos Mori, and they have a good reputation, and so on and so forth. But I think that the response rate was poor. Somewhere in the report, there's an indication that Leeds had far more respondents than anywhere else, but I now can't find it. Of course, there's so much of it. This is not devolution; it's delegation, and I really think that it's not a good thing at all. Finally, beware of Greeks bearing gifts. As far as I can make out, that was all about the Trojan horse. So I probably need say no more. I just don't think this is a good thing for us at all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Cabinet member, I did support this, but I do have anxious moments about this, and it is a worrying time. It is a big game changer. Or was it to face a penalty? I hope that moving forward, the collective leaders which are working with this government keep your eye on the ball and understand you've added another, or about to add another layer
or a tier to a very difficult democratic process. And it's worrying for me about our communities. It's already difficult for them to contribute and be engaged in things. But what's worrying me even more, we go out there as community ambassadors are saying, you know, that we want to support systems and it's our place, our communities, your place, your voice. Well, I think it's been lost in this. I think moving forward, I want to see where the accountability is, addressing all the inequalities that Councillor Walker and all the others have said tonight. It's about the funding, the transport, the housing. I hope through it you don't lose sight that we need to bring the benefits back to Kirklees, and how will the funding be divided? So it's just that I want to support it, but and I am going to, and I have done as a cabinet member, but there's worrying times ahead, and I just look at COVID, how that was managed. I know I shouldn't be bringing that into it, but it's worrying because I think you've got the Northern Ireland thing, the changing, going back on deals. That's what's worrying me.
Councillor Pinnock, Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's been a good debate so far, and what has been interesting is the number of councillors from across the different parties who have major concerns actually about the establishment of the West Yorkshire Mayoral Authority, and I do share a lot of those misgivings. This is not devolution, it is delegation. I mean, Councillor Pandor gave a list of the monies that we were going to have, but they were all monies that were being sent down, that were already allocated to be spent by Westminster, that were simply being delegated down to be spent here. And okay, there is a sort of benefit from that in a way, but it is not devolution. That's the first thing that many people have said. And of course, where's a local voice in that? Where is the voice of people in Cleckheaton, in Dewsbury, in Huddersfield, in the Combe Valley? Where are those voices going to be heard in this situation where we have one single person plus 2 appointees, which is a dreadful thing, and then just the leaders of the local authorities, 5 local authorities plus 1 or 2 others. That's not acceptable, actually, to anybody when they are going to be putting forward major strategic plans. So having a say is going to be absolutely vital in this. One issue that nobody has so far raised, and it's fascinating that it wasn't asked in the Ipsos Murray thing, how much are they going to charge the taxpayer, the council taxpayer? Well, I can tell you what's happened in Manchester. In Manchester, they have a precept for the mayor, and last year it was £14 on a Band D council tax for the mayoral authority. So what we have to explain to people is they're going to be asked to pay an additional, presumably in the same sort of ballpark as that, to fund the mayoral authority, in which they will have no say. In which they will have no say. That to me is fundamentally unacceptable. Taxation and no representation. Not right. Then the last thing I want to say, or possibly the last thing anyway, is it does seem to me that one of the positive things we can do, because clearly this is going to go through, the Cabinet, as Councillor Hall has reminded us, have made the decision and it's their decision. But one thing the Cabinet could do is decide to establish a standing scrutiny panel in Kirklees so that councillors in Kirklees can scrutinise for our residents what decisions are being made in West Yorkshire. Are we getting value for money? Are we getting a fair deal out of the funding that has been spent? And at least then there would be some accountability, not about what the decisions are made by the mayoral authority. A scrutiny panel in the West Yorkshire Mayoral Authority will not necessarily hear the voices of councillors and local people here. That's one thing we could do, and I urge us to do it. And the last just word of warning, Councillor Pandor. Our Prime Minister currently has not the best track record of keeping his promises. Maybe, just maybe, you should begin to doubt his word.
Thank you. Councillor Smage. Councillor Smage, on mute, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, my mouse just wasn't working, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. The word scrutiny has been mentioned a couple of times. Without getting into the political debate, scrutiny has looked at the consultation. We looked at it twice, on the 9th of June and informally on the 10th of July. And we raised some questions, that were sent to the combined authority, even though that is not recognised in their main report. We did send some questions in. I would also like to say that I do think it's important that there is scrutiny, and that I think it's important that any governance changes that may be necessary in Kirklees have full scrutiny as well. I also would have asked for discussions on deadlines for reports to come in good time to be put in front of decision makers in good time, rather than having tight deadlines. But I do think, Mr. Mayor, that certainly scrutiny in Kirklees has a role, even though a lot of scrutiny will happen at the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, certainly in looking at how it would impact on Kirklees as regards governance. Thank you.
Councillor Donovan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm hoping you can hear me. We've covered quite a lot of ground here so far this evening, and I think, yes, this has been a long time coming. This council has lost around about £200 million in its grant funding since 2010. 38 million a year for the next few years is just not going to fill that hole that we still miss. This council still obviously aspires to do a lot more than it does in 2020. So I think the funding could be greatly improved. I'm concerned to see such a low number of the 2,000 digitally disadvantaged people responding to this consultation. Only 96 of the 2,000 that were mailed out responded. I'm disappointed to see that only 500 and odd of the young people, although designated as young people, of the 4,413 responded. And in fact, the designation of a young person is 16 to 34. And what I'd be really interested to see is what those 16 to 24 numbers were. Because I really want to know what that particular demographic think to this model, because surely they're the ones that are going to sort of inherit this new devolution and mayoral system that we are about to unleash on West Yorkshire. I'm trying to focus on the bit where the 38 million is new-ish money, if you could put it that way. It's money that we didn't used to have across West Yorkshire that we now do. But I think a little bit like the outturn report that we saw, the smallest paragraph in the outturn report was probably one of the most significant parts. You know, the commitment that we've got to provide these new children's homes, giving young people that real chance to thrive and get on in life in a supportive way. And I really hope that the mayoral system really does reach out to the deprived communities and those people that are the hardest to reach. Because it seems on the consultation, we haven't really, or the consultation hasn't really reached that many of those people. And we have to keep in mind is that we really must be determined to reach those people those communities and those families through however this model develops, really, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Mather?
I think that's just a comment.
Is it? All right. Councillor Walker?
I get as well as Councillor Greaves.
Or is it Councillor Greaves?
Hello, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I share a lot of the concerns that have been raised by previous speakers. This isn't real devolution. In fact, it takes up some local powers. It's worrying in that respect. I support the idea of a regional assembly, and I can't help but think that if we had something similar to what they have in Scotland, Northern Ireland or Wales, along with the kind of funding that they get, that would radically change the lives of our residents. But that's not what's on offer. I don't support the proposals. I won't vote for it, but it's coming anyway, whether we like it or not. And I do welcome getting back some of our money. And I hope that when the new Mayoralty Combined Authority looks at its spending proposals, it remembers the whole of West Yorkshire and doesn't consider itself as something akin to Greater Leeds. There is a worrying trend within some of the information coming out from the West Yorkshire Combined Authority that just seems to have a real Leeds emphasis towards it. And I think it's important that this is coming whether we like it or not. We need to be active, involved participants within the arrangements. The agenda item specifically is about this consultation, and I'm not really clear what action is being proposed in respect to those people who have, in respect to the comments that have come in from those people who have taken the time to respond to the consultation. Over 4,000 people. It looks just like they're bundling up the consultation, doing some numbers analysis on where it's come in, but doesn't appear to be any proposals to change anything from having having got the views of these 4,000 residents. So it would be useful to find out if anything at all is going to change as a result of this public consultation exercise. I think there are some things that could be changed that would help matters. So it's coming whether we like it or not. The authority, the new authority, is going to have 11 key members. So there will be the mayor, 2 non-voting additional members, but from the councils, there'll be the leaders of each council. But there's only going to be 3 places for additional members to reflect political makeup across West Yorkshire. So that's going to exclude a good number of people, certainly from the Greens and various independent groups. It's highly unlikely we'll even get anywhere near the combined authority, which means that the tens of thousands of people that we represent effectively are not going to have a voice. So one of the changes that could be made quite easily, and this is within the power of West Yorkshire leaders to do, is to change that 3 additional members and make it 5 additional members, and at least allow more people around the table to give a broader range of views. And as Councillor Baroness Pinnock has stated, and I think also other councillors, we could do an awful lot to get more involved in the scrutiny of what the combined authority is going to do. And it would be nice if all 69 councillors at Kirklees had a clear view on what West Yorkshire or what the mayoral combined authority is going to be getting up to, what decisions it's making, how it's coming at those decisions, how those decisions can be challenged. That's me for now. As I say, I won't be voting for it and supporting it, but it's going to go ahead anyway. I think we'll have some more words to say back in November. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Warner. Councillor Warner.
Thank you. Right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just basically want to speak rather as a resident rather than a councillor, which is the people who didn't have an opportunity because they didn't do it. The consultation was mainly online. So many people, I just feel that it's a very small number of people who've been consulted. And following on what Councillor Scott and Councillor Walker have said, it's clear that everybody's feeling very torn and that there are many reservations about what we're going ahead with. And I'm worried that we're being bribed. We're basically being said, here's this money, you won't get it any other way. And actually, we don't know for sure that it'll all come through. We've got a government that are changing their mind about all sorts of things all the time. And it worries me that this needs more time and more thinking, even though we haven't got it. But I wanted to place on record my thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Pando.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and can I just thank everybody for their valuable contributions, and it is difficult. Look, the way I see is we've all been, all the parties have been in administration, and you know that the ideal solution is always probably impossible or extremely difficult to find. And I can remember that, when Tony Blair was in power, John Prescott tried to get a deal through, and nothing happened. And back in 2012, when the coalition government came in, they developed the city deal, and that's what we've got at the moment. And to be honest with you, although the money is coming in, other regions have actually bypassed us, and other regions are getting access to the funds. And I'll come on to the powers and all that in a minute, but it's we're getting left behind. And at the moment, what we've got is we've got a bidding process. We've got to jump through a number of hoops, and the money we get is peanuts. So this deal is probably the best deal, right? Yeah, that's ever been had, right? Yeah, for any region. And let me just squash a few incorrections, because I think the members might be misled or misinformed. Firstly, planning powers. We will not lose any of our planning powers. So the stuff that we do within the Heavy Bullen and the Huddersfield planning committees and the strategic planning committee, they will not be devolved up. The devolution that's taking place is devolving down, and we've just been through a local plan process. Other authorities are at different stages, and some are more or less where we are at the moment. So all them plans put together will form the regional spatial strategy, and in some ways, that overarching awareness of what's happening at each local authority level is actually good. But if we feel in this council that the mayor is overstepping the mark, whoever is the leader will be able to go forward. He or she will say, sorry, my council does not agree with this, and it won't happen. In terms of precepts, Manchester's situation is very, very different. And each devolution deal that was had in the past, has got certain nuances that are very, very different. For example, Manchester have got the powers to have a big say on the health authority. I personally won't want to do that because I would not want to be in a situation where I'm looking at the hospital configuration across 3 local authority sites within Kirklees, because that would actually cause a big problem, not just for my party, but every party, and quite rightly so. In terms of democracy, I hear what you're saying, and I think a number of members have raised that. What we have done so far, and again, the combined authority, which the overall body is made up of cross-party councillors, including a Green councillor from York, and we've had this debate there. David, you've been part of that process. I know you're not on the committee anymore, but we do talk about this, and we do actually raise this. And Councillor Gorton from Leeds, the Lib Dem councillor, he's actually very, very passionate about what we're doing, and we do try and get things right within a given situation. So that process was agreed, and the process that was agreed was we will take it to cabinet and then it'll go to council. But what we will do for November, we can do it the other way around. I can't see an issue with that. In terms of scrutiny, I've fed that back to the combined authority. So let's see what comes back. You know, I've got an open mind. I don't think it's feasible, really, David, to delay this, because one of the things Robert Jenrick and Simon Clark, who's no longer the minister, he stepped down for personal reasons, said that there are other deals that they need to do, namely the East Riding and the whole and the rest of Humberside, and because ours was more or less, you know, quite advanced, you know, they put all the resources behind them, and they also now got a white paper around the districts where they're going to try and reform the districts and try and get them to become unitary. I had the same kind of fears and doubts that this will be devolution and this will be the end of local government. The paper we have in front of us and the details I've seen, and you'll see further details get ironed out as we move forward into November. Yeah, there will be nothing that we will lose in terms of our own powers and influence. You know, and this will be, we were very clear, not just the local authority leaders, but also the
Councillor Pandor, your time's over.
So I hope that I've given you some assurance. But let's keep on talking. I have listened to everybody. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We now move to the vote.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Members, if you could indicate for, against or abstain, please. Councillor Pandor.
For.
Councillor David Hall.
Abstain.
Councillor Lawson.
Against.
Councillor Cooper.
Abstain.
Councillor Greaves.
Abstain.
Councillor Ahmed.
For.
Councillor Akhtar.
For.
Councillor Allison.
Abstain.
Councillor Armour.
Abstain.
Councillor Asif.
For.
Councillor Bellamy.
Abstain.
Councillor Bolt.
Abstain.
Councillor Burke.
Against.
Councillor Butt. Councillor Butt. Councillor Paula Davis.
Against.
Councillor Paul Davis.
For.
Councillor Eastwood. Councillor Eastwood. Councillor Donald Firth.
Abstain.
Councillor Eric Firth.
For.
Councillor Goodwin.
Abstain.
Councillor Granger Mead.
Abstain.
Councillor Steve Hall.
For.
Councillor Holmes. Councillor Holmes.
Abstain.
Councillor Hill.
For.
Councillor Homewood.
For.
Councillor Hussain, the Mayor.
For.
Councillor Yusra Hussain. Councillor Yusra Hussain.
For. For.
Thank you. Councillor Iredale. Councillor Korshik.
For.
Councillor Kendrick. Councillor Kendrick. If I could go back to Councillor Butt, who I think is back online. Councillor Butt.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Khan.
For.
Councillor Lees Hamilton.
Abstain.
Councillor Lee Richards.
Abstain.
Councillor Lowe.
For.
Councillor Lukic.
For.
Councillor Lyons.
Abstain.
Councillor Marchington.
Against.
Councillor Mather.
For.
Councillor McBride. Councillor McBride.
Sorry, four.
4. Thank you. Councillor McGuinn.
Abstain.
Councillor Murgatroyd.
4.
Councillor O'Donovan.
4.
Councillor Patrick.
Abstain.
Councillor Patterson.
4.
Councillor Pervez.
4.
Councillor Amanda Pinnock.
4.
Councillor Andrew Pinnock.
Against.
Councillor Kath Pinnock.
Against.
Councillor Sarwar.
4.
Councillor Scott.
4.
Councillor Simpson.
4.
Councillor Smage.
Abstain.
Councillor Anthony Smith.
Against.
Councillor Richard Smith.
Abstain.
Councillor Sokol.
For.
Councillor John Taylor.
Abstain.
Councillor Kath Taylor.
Abstain.
Councillor Thompson.
Abstain.
Councillor Turner.
4.
Councillor Uller.
4.
Councillor Uppal.
4.
Councillor Walker.
4.
Councillor Warner.
4.
Councillor Watson.
Abstain.
Councillor White.
Abstain.
And Councillor Zaman.
4.
Thank you, Chair. That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's carried. Right, we're going for a 10-minute break now. So if you leave your systems on and just mute it and come back in 10 minutes. Thank you.
Cameras off.
Thank you, everybody, and welcome back. We're on item 9. The minutes of the meeting of Cabinet are here for information to note. Item 10, maximum of 45 minutes have been allocated for this item. There is no restriction on the number of questions any member may ask within the allocated time, subject to only one question and the supplementary at any one time. In addition to asking questions, a member may comment once for a maximum of 5 minutes at any item within the Cabinet minutes. Are there any questions? Councillor Richard Smith. On mute, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, fine, thank you.
Question to Councillor Pandor, please. Can you just clarify, when is the mayor making ceremony going to take place for the current municipal year, please?
Councillor Pandor.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Smith, and hope you are well, and good to hear from you. As you know, Councillor Smith, before the pandemic and before we went into lockdown, things seemed to be running normally, but quite rightly, the government actually A, put everybody into restrictions and lockdown, and B, they passed primary legislation to enable councils to continue doing the business that they need to do, because on the back of the pandemic, especially with the private sector having such a big blow on the economy, nosediving so drastically, it was up to local government, public services, NHS, the voluntary community sector and the faith sector to actually step in and carry on as best they can. At the same time, what the government did was to pass legislation to say that we don't need to have a council AGM, and elections were postponed. So very early doors, we had an agreement with all the leading members that we will continue as normal. Also, each individual party has got its own rules and regulations. From a Labour Party point of view, we were told very, very clearly that all meetings of the Labour Party, be Labour group meetings or constituency meetings or branch meetings, cannot go ahead. So basically, there were constitutional issues, and the position we arrived at was the mayor will continue, and the deputy mayor will continue until next May, when I'm hoping that there will be a full AGM. Thanks, Councillor Smith.
No? Right, Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question's to Councillor Turner in relation to the fantastic news that there is going to be investment, 799,000 in a new library building for residents of Birkby and Fartown. My question is, what investment will be put into current libraries, whilst not forgetting the well-used libraries that we have, in particular in Linley, and what investment will be made in the refurbishment, the much-needed refurbishment of Linley Library?
Thank you, Councillor Burke. I think I sent you a letter back in March outlining the plans, but obviously those plans have since been blown off, caused by COVID. We haven't had a library service as such because as soon as COVID broke, they all went to do different things, and we're only just getting back on our feet now with some limited opening and browsing and the click and collect. So it's something I'll pick up when we're a bit further down the line. I still regularly meet with the Chief Librarian, and I will be picking that up with her at our next conversation.
Councillor Burke, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, thank you, Councillor Turner. I welcome the positive news going on the letter that you sent previously, which wasn't so positive. So whilst the library might have not been operating as usual, the council has still managed to find this investment of 799,000. So things have been operating, things have been going. So I hope you would not neglect the residents of Linley and the residents and the people who use the library in Lindley, in Birkby, Birching Cliff, Sallandine Nook, Oaks, Quarmby, Rainwood and Marsh, to name but a few, and that you will find fit and see that we deserve the investment as well as other areas. Thank you.
Just to clarify, the money for the new Burberry libraries in the capital plan that was allocated at the last council budget, that is dealt with a different department. It's not dealt with direct with libraries. So that's the reason that's been progressing. That's been progressing with myself and that department. So it's not the library service that's doing that as such. It's the corporate landlord and the people in that department.
Thank you. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, Councillor Pandor. It's touching on a subject that we've discussed previously. It's the household refuse sites again. The site at Bromley Farm is clearly still causing significant issues for people in Denbigh ward. Looking at the email traffic and correspondence that I'm getting, and so my question really is whether you feel there's been any, or whether you're aware that there has been any measurable improvement in the service that is delivered to the residents of the ward over the last few months, and going forward, whether you think that there is anything else that the council could be doing to improve that service. And secondly, I would anticipate under the current regime, the volumes, the throughput of waste at these type of sites is down, and therefore, is the council paying anything less for the provision of that service than in normal circumstances? Thank you.
Councillor Pandor.
Thank you, Councillor Watson, and I'm well. I hope you're doing well as well. Can I pass that on to Councillor Naheed Mather, who's a cabinet member responsible for this area of work? Councillor Naheed Mather, are you there, Naheed?
I am, but I didn't hear the question. Could I have the question again, please?
Sorry, Michael.
Not a problem. Let me put it in a real nutshell. Has there been any noticeable improvement in the service delivered from Bromley Farm, a refuse site, to the residents of Denbigh over the last few months? Is it anticipated that there will be any improvement over the coming months? And is it the case that volume throughputs at these sites is down? And if so, is the council paying any less for the provision of the service?
Councillor Watson, you've asked two questions, so you won't get a supplementary. Councillor Mather.
Okay, so there has been improvement in all our household waste sites. We are getting the volumes through most of the time, although we still have the usual restrictions because of COVID. Moving forward, we are hoping things will get back to normal, but your guess is as good as mine. Nationally, the situation is beginning to spike again, so we will have to wait and see what the household waste sites can and cannot take in order to increase capacity.
Thank you. Councillor Idale. Councillor Christine Idale, on mute, please. Is there? Say that again, Councillor Idale.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can, yes.
I'd like to ask a question to Councillor Walker, asking what on earth is happening to the bin collections in the Gorka ward. They really are awful.
Councillor Walker.
Right, thanks very much for the question, Councillor Idale. It would be really useful if you could give me some further details. I know quite often where you've had these kind of issues, you have given me these details, which has allowed me to follow that up with officers. So apologies if there have been some real problems. I know some of the areas close to Gorka, there have been some difficulties. Because I've been made aware of those, I have been able to follow things up and sort things out. So if you could send me the things through, Christine, I'll look into it and I'll get straight back to you.
Right, thank you very much for that. Can I ask you a supplementary?
You can.
Right. A while ago, Kirklees had a very, very good reputation for recycling. I would like to know what our position is now as far as recycling as a council.
Right, I can't give you, unfortunately, I can't give you the exact figures off the top of my head. This is something I work on with Councillor Mather, and it is something that we're looking at really closely as part of the waste strategy. With the new contract when it comes in, there are obviously going to be very significant changes, but we are hoping to make changes even before that comes in an attempt to improve our recycling performance. And remember as well, the underlying thing that we're trying to do is to minimise waste. We're looking at ways in which we can cut down the volume of waste that's going into the system. Okay, so if you would like the most up-to-date exact figures, I will ask for those as well, and I will send them through to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bolt.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question to the leader. Would you say that decisions made by this council should have full facts for members to consider when making those decisions?
Councillor Pando.
Yes. Councillor Martin Bolt.
Supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was waiting for you, not the leader.
Yeah.
Given that, then, would you say that the situation recently on the Strategic Planning Committee relating to a development of a supermarket in Mirfield, where staff recently submitted that Kirklees Highways would not support a safe, signalised pedestrian crossing on the A644, paid for by the developer, as Kirklees Highways thought more signals would be detrimental in Mirfield Town Centre, is somewhat hypocritical when your Highways Department, as you well know, are submitting plans for the Mirfield-Dewsbury-Leeds highway improvement, which shows a signalised crossing 200 yards away from the proposed supermarket site. So on the one hand, denying people crossing to a supermarket a safe facility, saying that more signals would be detrimental, yet planning the same thing through a consultation period at the moment. Surely saying that they would not support signalised control crossings is misleading to the committee, hypocritical by Highways, and failing our residents.
Thank you, Martin. I don't know the details of the application you're talking about. Neither am I on the Strategic Planning Committee, neither do I chair it. So I think it's best and safe, because obviously it's a planning matter, to get you a response outside this meeting, because I don't want to unduly influence one way or another anything that's taking place. But I'll get back to you with a full response. And just to clarify, Martin, it's our highway department. It's not mine. It's everybody's. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention that. Thanks.
Sorry,
you,
as the
Councillor
leader,
Pando.
you take responsibility for it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Lukic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask Councillor Pandor, over the last 2 to 3 weeks, many areas of Dewsbury and Batley have experienced relatively low rates of coronavirus cases, but are still under additional local restrictions. What is being done to encourage the release of these areas from local restrictions?
You're completely right. The figures are coming down. They're stable. If you look at it from a national point of view and a regional point of view, other areas that are surrounding us are actually going up. For example, Bradford and Leeds. Calderdale is probably on the same trajectory as us, i.e. stable. It's not going exponentially up. Nationally, again, if you compare ourselves to other national local authorities, our figures are low. And I've kept a consistent message, as you know, Councillor Lucic, that we should never have been in restrictions in the first place. The only reason I agreed that, okay, we are where we are and I'll work with the government was because the Public Health England advice around community safety, around public health, around saving NHS and saving lives was overwhelming. So that was purely based on evidence based. More recently, what happened was some local MPs or MPs nationally, saw that the restrictions were not working from their point of view. So what they did was they managed to persuade the government to start looking at areas within local authorities and for example with those local wards, and then with myself leader and other opposition leaders and the 4 MPs in this case in our local authority come to a consensus. And the consensus we have come to, which is really a key point here, is we don't believe that the area as a whole should be in restrictions, and that's our position. So not just myself, but with the other opposition leaders and the MPs, our position is still the same. We should be coming out of local restrictions based on the evidence we have, and that is what our position is at this moment in time as well. We met yesterday, and we're just going back to government and saying that we should not be in local restrictions. I think Silver Command meets today. They've already probably met. The decision or their recommendation will be going to Gold Command, and we are in the hands of Gold Command. Their decision will be known by the end of the week.
Thank you. No supplementary for that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor McGuinn.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. My question is to, well, anybody in the Cabinet who can answer this. Why couldn't Kirklees pay the private financing on Almonbury Community School to allow an academy to take over the site? That's on behalf of a lot of residents in Almonbury who are asking that question.
Well, because it sounds like a financier type question, I'll ask Councillor Graham Turner if he can respond, and or maybe look into it and get back. So Graham, are you?
Nobody's asked me about it, to be honest with you. If somebody wants to approach me, make a formal request, I'll find out. But it's never been raised. So the honest answer is I don't know, because it's not been raised.
Supplementary.
Although I would ask the Cabinet many times this question, but I would like if it's all possible. So now we're moving towards enlarging King James's School. What is Kirklees prepared to put in mitigation in Almonbury to help students travel?
I think your reception is not very good at your end, Councillor McGuinn.
Hello?
Hello, yeah?
Yeah. I'm asking, what are Kirklees prepared to put in Almonbury to mitigate the traffic problems which will be possibly caused by an enlargement of King James's School?
Could I answer that?
Yes, yeah, Rob.
Yeah, Rob, sorry, just coming, Mr. Mayor. You or Carol Patterson, which is school's answer. So, Carol, if you want to come in as well, I don't know. It's particularly regarding the school's PFI.
I can say something. I mean, a little bit about the PFI and the traffic issue. Though Rob will probably want to come in about that. Just in terms of the PFI, it's 20. I forgot. I can't remember off the top of my head, but 25-30 year contract that we've entered into, and it is very, very difficult to buy oneself out of that, and expensive to do that. And there is no need for us to do that because the building is still ours as an authority, and we can make use of it as an educational establishment in some way, whilst still benefiting, if that's the right word, from the PFI. In terms of the traffic issues, I mean, we would always hope and encourage all schools though they're not required to anymore because the government took this requirement away, but we would always hope that they have a traffic management plan for the school. And it's certainly something which, of course, King James has taken into account when looking at how they can organise everything on their site in future. We will hopefully having more people walking to school in the future than do now, or car sharing more than we do now. But if there's I'm not aware of any specific highways works that are going to take place, but I'll let Councillor Rob Walker come in on that aspect.
Right, thank you, Carol. Yeah, in response to the traffic issues, last cabinet meeting, which was last week, Councillor Munro raised this in terms of a pedestrian crossing down at Fenny Bridge, and as a result of that, I took that up with highways officers. I also raised, Bernard, a point you raised some months ago, I think, about St Helens Gate going down to King James School, and as a result of that, I discussed the possibility of fixing up a meeting with yourself and your ward colleagues with highways to discuss some of these issues and look at their practicality, what kind of things we may be able to do. So I will follow that up with highways and I will make sure that happens. I am really interested that you seem to be advocating now a policy of closing down King James School to move the school to the Almondbury site. I'd be really interested to know how much public support you've had for that, and is that something that you've discussed with your electorate in the ward?
I've not advocated that. I'm having a discussion. The electorate obviously want to know what's going on, and I'm telling them that the plan to expand.
Can we now have a debate, please? You've asked the question, and Councillor Walker has replied. So can we go to the next person, Councillor Idale?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Idale.
Can I ask a question to Councillor McBride?
Yes, you can.
Councillor McBride, what is happening with the town bus?
I'm not aware there's any particular change. I can find out for you, Christina, and I will certainly let you know. Okay.
Well, what I'd like to do is, it would appear that Cross Church Street has been made pedestrian. So how is it going to go onto Cross Church Street to Kingsgate into the shops on Cross Church Street?
I'll check for you, Christine. I'll check.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hall, David Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've changed my question I was going to ask because I am irritated by the disingenuous answer that Councillor Pandor gave to Councillor Smith's question earlier. Before I ask my question, Mr. Mayor, this is in no way intended as a slight to you or your office because I hold you in the highest regard. Councillor Pandor, will you accept that although leaders agreed not to hold an annual meeting because of the circumstances, this, under our constitution, in no way prohibits the holding of a mayor making?
Councillor Pandor.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Hall. David, look, we've had a conversation on this a number of times, and I've given you my view very, very clearly. I don't really want to, talk too much based on our personal conversations, but the position is very, very clear. The government passed primary legislation. We agreed very early days that there won't be no election, and we'll basically postpone everything till May. That is what I've advised all my group. That's what I've advised the current mayor, and that's where we're at now. I understand that the functionality and the function of the mayor must continue, which Jackie is working up the details on in terms of how we can make the mayor's office function and the mayoralty continue, and we are already doing that. So I can't add anything else, David. I'm sorry if you feel like that.
Thank you. Supplementary, Councillor David Hall.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that is absolute bluster and obfuscation, and it doesn't answer my point at all. This is nothing to do with the government. The government gives us choices, and it's our decision to make them. Why will he not consider a mayor making ceremony during this year? We know we don't need an annual meeting, and the only answer that he's given so far is that he either doesn't want or can't organise a Labour Party meeting.
Well, no, see, again, I don't want to go into detail. No, David, I'm managing my group. If I have problems with 30 plus odd members, I will deal with them. Now, I don't want to get into this debate, especially over Skype and Teams and in public. But I think we need to agree to disagree on this, right? Yeah, we all have issues, right? Yeah, we all have problems, and we all need to manage our own groups. If we want to talk about the mayoralty and how the mayoralty can actually go about doing its job and being an ambassadorial role for the council, fair enough. But I'm not going to go into debate about individual members, whoever they are, be mayors or cabinet members or deputy mayors. I don't think it's the right forum, David.
Councillor Smith.
Sorry, I had a poor connection then. This is for Councillor McBride, please. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, fine.
Cool. So we've seen the start of work to develop a future vision for Huddersfield and Dewsbury town centres. Could you inform council as to the administration's plans for the smaller town centres, such as Kirklees, Holmfirth, Batley, etc.?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The plans essentially to add other places to the two main towns for the first year include the three of Clegg and Holmfirth, so this is going into operation as we speak. I think some of the details are well developed in Hetland White, particularly, somewhat less so perhaps in Batley. Yeah.
Supplementary?
Yeah, please. Yeah. Can we be assured that local councils will be consulted and included in these plans? I mean, speaking specifically about my ward now, I've got specific concerns about parking and sustainability in places like Kirkburton. So we'd like the opportunity to feed into your plan when that comes up.
Okay. First of all, I should have included Clegg. I didn't make a comment. It will be part of this first stage programme. Kirkburton isn't currently on the plans. That is to say, for this coming year, it will be on a later stage. We will consider it, but no area will be excluded. I do assure you on that.
Thank you, Councillor Bolt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Picking up on Councillor Hall's comments, this is not a question about individuals, the mayoralty. It's about the office, the function, and the changeover. And as Councillor Hall rightly says, it's not dependent on an annual council meeting. This council has made remarkable steps in having virtual meetings, Councillor Pandor. In fact, looking at the TV screen at the moment, one could almost think that yourself and Councillor Walker were in the same room and sitting on each other's knees by the screen. Obviously, that's not so. So it's possible.
Don't say that, Martin. Somebody might take offence.
That's how it appears on the screen.
No, don't worry. That was only a joke, mate.
So, given that, why can't we move towards having a virtual mayor making? Why can't
Martin, Councillor Bolt, can I just say these questions should be to the cabinet and not to the executive, to the council, yeah. So this is only to the cabinet.
This is to the cabinet. It's to the leader who is in charge of all things. Leader can delegate if he wants. The first responsibility of the leader is to have responsibility for the matters pertaining to the council. If not the leader, who is in charge of the civic office? Who is the cabinet member in charge of the civic office?
I can answer that, Mr. Mayor. Look, Martin, I don't want to have a debate about what you're talking about here, because you've just taken an opportunity based on a few questions, right? Yeah, that have come up. Yeah, this is something that we've been dealing with for some time. I've explained the situation without trying to maintain sort of like some kind of sense in the debate. And I don't think this is the time to actually start talking about something, right? Yeah, that is regarding individuals, and I don't think I just don't think it's the right place, Martin. So with all due respect, right? Yeah, I've explained the situation. I've tried to be as honest and as open as fair as I can. I'm actually disappointed, right? Yeah, that you've actually raised it without having any knowledge of this at all.
Supplementary, Mr. Mayor. I don't know how many times people have got to say this is not about individuals. It's about the office, the function, and the discharge. Nobody has mentioned any individuals. As Councillor Hall has said, and I echo that, we have perfect confidence in the discharge of the duty by the Mayor. He's done a good job, but we have a usual procedure of turning things over. I mean, somebody has taken a decision that we're not going to have a Mayor making. And if we could have, if you could tell us who's taken that decision, I'm sure the matter could be put to rest. But can we say again, if this is not about individuals, nobody has mentioned an individual, and it's disingenuous of you to say that.
Martin, let me just, without the danger of repeating myself.
Councillor Pandor, I think we're going to stop questions on Mayor making because I don't think so. It's the right place. So okay. Can we have the next question from Councillor Anthony Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mine's a question to Councillor Walker regarding the scourge of fly tipping once again. Is Councillor Walker aware of the persistent fly tipping issues we've had around the beauty spot around Grimescar Road? Despite the road being closed and extreme measures being taken by some vehicles to bypass the blockades and illegally dump all sorts of horrible things in this area. Me and my ward councillors have asked on several occasions for some proactive measures such as signage and CCTV. Is he aware of any progress in this area? Can he give us an update?
Okay. This is not actually my portfolio. It's actually Councillor Mather. So I don't want to step on her toes. So if Councillor Mather would like to come in.
Yes. Councillor Smith, have you actually reported this fly tipping issue? Because I don't believe I've actually seen any emails come my way to sort this out.
Many times to councillor support, but not to you, I have to admit. Okay,
so can you please send it to me and I will ensure that we do something about it. Fly tipping is a blot on the landscape. It is an offence. It ruins our environment, and we need to make sure that we are able to enforce and we are able to take tough action straight away. And if there are measures we can put in place which will save the public, all of us, money, then I'm up for it. So please send me the information.
Thank you very much. Quick supplementary. Hello.
Yes.
Am I being heard? Oh, thank you. Could I ask what kind of, are you aware of what kind of success rate we get in terms of follow-ups and prosecutions?
Actually, our office is working incredibly hard, and where we have the information, we are extremely successful. It does take time, and with COVID, there has been a backlog, not from our end, more from the courts and things. So we are successful where we have the evidence and where we can, I mean, we're looking into other ways of actually detecting as well. So I would say, yes, we are successful, but I could get you the figures if you need those. I can't say off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll follow up via email. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, question for Councillor Mather.
Nigel's going to ask it.
Yeah, question for Councillor Mather. Shoppers parking in Huddersfield Town Centre. The people who park all day there, do you believe it is people who work in the town centre or people who are shopping in Huddersfield Town Centre doing on-street parking?
Councillor Cooper, I have heard what people are saying and what you yourself, the question you have asked, it is a concern. We are trying to make sure that we keep the policy under review. We are being told that despite it being for economic recovery, that people are coming in and parking all day, we have introduced, as you know, there was a press release last week which said we have introduced more enforcement of on-road parking or short stay parking, but that doesn't alleviate some of the criticism we're getting, so hence it is under review. And if we find that it is getting in the way, in any way, in the way of our shoppers, then we will take immediate action. Thank you.
Supplementary. So you've introduced more enforcement around the short stay. How many prosecutions or have you made?
I wouldn't be able to say how many prosecutions we've made. We only made the press release only went out last week.
Penalty charge notices then. How many penalty charge notices have been issued?
I will get the information to you. It's not something I have at hand, but I am sure we have some.
I understand that it may be zero charge notices.
Councillor Cooper, she's answered the question, so thank you very much. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's one for Councillor Patterson, if that's okay. Really, our schools return this week, and I just thought we ought to perhaps just get an update, if you wouldn't mind, Carol, on what the experience has been like across Kirklees, and especially for our more vulnerable and our looked after children.
Well, I'm not quite sure exactly what you want to hear, but I mean, it's obviously very early days at the moment. I mean, some schools have only taken in 1 year group as of today, even, what we know so far is that there's a very good attendance rate. Some schools have actually reported 100% of attendance. Where there hasn't been such a good attendance, we understand schools have been ringing, obviously, parents and saying, why haven't you sent your child to school? And what we often hear is that they're either stuck abroad or they've come back and they've had to self-isolate, or there is another member of the family and they're having to self-isolate or not send the child to school for that reason because another member of the family has got symptoms. So it seems that children are very happy, and as far as I know, parents are as well. All children and parents are being very cooperative in terms of all the processes and procedures and arrangements that have had to be put in place. A couple of places those haven't been quite as good as they might be, and already they've taken feedback from parents or from our staff, and changes are being made. I was in a conversation only today with the chief executives of all the MATs that work in Kirklees and some representatives of head teachers, and there's individual hiccups which are in their individual schools which they're having to overcome, but so far they are very happy with what's going on or what's happening.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, supplementary.
To be fair, not really a supplementary. It was just I just felt it was worthwhile us having that discussion, Carol.
Yeah.
And, just like to add my thanks to all of the teachers and everyone who's been involved in getting the schools ready to return to school, because I mean it's been a huge challenge for everybody, and this is an opportunity where we should be saying thank you as a group. So I just thought I would chip in and do that. Thank you.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question for Councillor McBride. Historically, ward councils have been involved in how Section 106 monies are spent in the ward. I learnt this week that from now on, ward councillors will have very little input whatsoever in how public open space Section 106 money is spent. Staff tell me that they will decide where it's spent and how it is spent. Would you like to comment on that, please? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Patrick. I mean, what you told me is news to me. Always, you rightly say, members have been involved in the process. The degree to which they're involved, I think, will vary. I think largely depending on their willingness to make an input themselves. If there is a problem and you want me to take it up, I certainly will.
Supplementary, Councillor Patrick?
No, that's very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Paula Davis?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not new news that there's an accident black spot on the A629 at Penistone Road, Station Road and Fenny Lane junction. There's been a spate of further accidents over the summer. I think there were 3 major accidents within 2 weeks. The issue has even now been taken up by the Examiner and they're running a petition about the area. I understand that budgets are tight, but there's an opportunity for community infrastructure levy monies from nearby developments that could be used to fund improvements to the junction and also to improve the walking and cycling routes along the Penistone Road, Wakefield Road corridor. Developments which they're only going to add to and exacerbate the traffic along the corridor. I asked the leader if he can please confirm that the charging schedules that was recommended by the planning inspector in January of this year, which will facilitate the collection of those monies, are going to be adopted.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Davis. Rob, do you want to answer this, please?
I will respond to part of it. I think I've already mentioned it really in response to Councillor McGuinn earlier on that end of last week I had a discussion with highways officers around the safety issue on Penistone Road, but also linking that to the issue of safe travel to King James School. In terms of the traffic lights, from what I gather, the problem is actually the technical details of putting those in because at the right place without it having unintended negative consequences. And I do think it needs really carefully looking at. So the suggestion I made earlier about the meeting of highways staff with ward councillors, that is something I would like to pursue because I think it's important to go through with you in detail, looking at the roads and looking at some of the issues about what may happen if we put in things like traffic lights or pedestrian crossings. Like you, I used to live in Lepton, so I know the area really well. I've got quite a lot of relatives there. And I initially thought traffic lights, they're the answer. But when I've looked at this situation with the highways department, I can see it's very complex. It's not an easy thing to fix because of there's so much going on in that stretch of road. So I'm not dismissing what you're saying. I'm just saying that we need to have a really careful look at it. The other point that you made about the levies, I don't know if Councillor McBride could respond to that.
The levy so far hasn't been brought in, and the government are intending to take it out anyway. In the short term, I don't think will apply to your ward.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Then, so in that case, then what? Yeah. Sorry. I'm just losing my signal here. So while we're trying to find the funding, while we're waiting for the funding, then can we just get some schemes drawn up so that we can allocate the funding to them when they're available?
They'll be drawn up depending on whether or not that's regarded as a black spot or whether it's regarded as a priority. If it is, it will get priority, and we funded, within normal patterns, so I say.
Yeah, time's finished for the questions. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Right, so we go to the next item now, item 11. The minutes of the meeting of committees at agenda 11, item 11 are here for information to know. Item 12, questions to chairs of committees, subcommittees and panels and on matters within their terms of reference, including the minutes, item 11. Are there any questions? Anybody can ask a question to the chairs. Councillor Pinnock.
Yes, to Councillor O'Donovan, please, as Chair of the West Yorkshire Fire Authority. The West Yorkshire Fire Service, as Councillor O'Donovan will know, is determined to close Cleckheaton Fire Station, and the location in Cleckheaton is vital as it provides a speedy back access to the M62, which will be lost if the decision is confirmed. Can Councillor O'Donovan explain to people of Cleckheaton and surrounding areas why then he's intent on closing the fire station?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Pinnock. I think the first thing to say is I'm not intent on closing Cleckheaton Fire Station. We've just conducted an 8-week consultation into proposals from senior officers. The decision around the future of Cleckheaton won't be taken until the 18th of September, and that decision will be taken by the authority as a whole. The proposal is not to close Cleckheaton Fire Station. The proposal is to relocate all the appliances and all the firefighters to the HQ site. That's the proposal. Like I said, the consultation has ended, but a decision won't be taken until September the 18th.
Supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Donovan, for your response. I do have to say that using words like we're not closing Cleckheaton Fire Station, we're simply relocating it, will not be what will happen. Cleckheaton Fire Station will close, and services for some people in Cleckheaton will come from Brighouse, and access for fire service vehicles from Brighouse is difficult at the best of times. So we are, as far as we're concerned, it's a poor decision that is being proposed, especially as in February the fire service agreed to spend money on rebuilding the fire station. I'd like to know why that has happened and how you're going to ensure that the traffic accidents on the M62 will be reached as fast as they are now.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and that's one of the things that we are as members scrutinising at the moment in terms of what the our senior firefighters, the ones with the technical know-how around risk and management of risk. So we are deliberating on that right now, looking at the detail, looking at the response times in different areas. There is a context to this. This is for those that don't know some of the history. This is 10 years almost of reconfiguring West Yorkshire Fire, a little bit like the police have done, like Kirklees Council have done, with a hugely reduced funding pot and an altered and in many aspects a reduced fire risk over the last 10 years. So a number of years ago there was a merger, a closure at Batley and Dewsbury and a merger into one site. There was a closure at Haworth over in Bradford. There was a merger of the Ellendon Brighouse station in Halifax into Rastrick. So I think on the one hand, I wouldn't want the public to think that we are picking, or the officers are picking on Cleckheaton, because there's a 10-year improvement plan where the officers really want to see a much more dynamic, a much more future-proof facility in order to fight fire and rescue in West Yorkshire. So I was pleased that we were able to sit down, Councillor Pinnock, and Councillor Andrew Pinnock and Councillor Lawson a few weeks ago to discuss this. And like I said, yeah, we're deliberating at the moment, and the decision will be taken on the 18th. But like I said, there is quite a large financial and risk-based context to this that's affected the whole of West Yorkshire, and all the districts have seen changes to their number of firefighters and fire cover over the last 10 years. So I would probably think that officers at West Yorkshire Fire are in any way singling out Cleckheaton. This is a modernisation process and a process related to altered risk around the area. But you know, I take everybody's points into consideration. So will the full authority when we meet on the 18th.
Thank you for that. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a question to Councillor Steve Hall as Chair of Planning, if that's okay, Steve. And it's a question about when we're going to see the Heavy Woolen and Huddersfield Planning Committees reinstated, and what's actually preventing that from happening at the moment.
Right, members who sit on these committees, there's going to be a virtual meeting take place to make sure that all members on these committees know what's going on, what to expect, how to behave, all that kind of stuff. We were hoping to have one of the Huddersfield committee go ahead over the next week or so, but this has been put back. There's nobody more than me, believe you me, that wants these committees setting back up, although I will be chairing every one anyway. But I think Terry's raring to go to get Huddersfield up and running again as soon as we can, and the sooner the better. Obviously, what that will do, it'll lighten the load on strategic planning. To be quite honest, we are dealing with quite a lot of decisions on strategic planning that we shouldn't be doing, but because we've only got one committee up and running, unfortunately this is the way that we're having to go. But fingers crossed, within the next couple of weeks we'll be having us Huddersfield Planning Committee up and running and getting some decisions done.
Thanks, Steve. No supplementary.
Councillor Bolt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question to Councillor Ahmed, West Yorkshire Police and Crime Panel. Having read in the papers that the new location for the Kirklees Divisional HQ is Halifax Road at Dewsbury, can I ask what work has gone on to assess if this is the best strategic location for a new police headquarters to serve the whole of Kirklees, and how do the costs of refurbishing an old building compare to the costs of building a new facility?
Councillor Ahmed.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bolt. Actually, I've only just found out myself yesterday, having read Dewsbury Reporter, so I couldn't really even answer the question as yet, and not able to tell you anything because I've only just found out myself through reading the Huddersfield Examiner and Dewsbury Reporter that a location or a site has been looked at. However, there is a police and crime panel meeting this Friday, and I will be asking Mark Byrne-Williams in relation to what discussions have taken place, and those members that have read the Examiner or the Reporter, obviously for legal reasons, Mark hasn't commented as well. In relation to the other question, yeah, I mean, I do agree that the current police stations, both in Dewsbury and Huddersfield, are depleted, do need obviously work on them, and obviously a new site needs to be looked at. But like I've just said, I wasn't aware of the site in question is being looked at and discussions have been taking place. Martin.
Councillor Bolt, supplementary.
Yes, and thanks to Councillor Ahmed for that full and frank answer. In the light of which, do you think it is correct that the Police and Crime Panel should be bypassed for when making decisions of such importance? Shouldn't it be used at least as a scrutiny committee and things discussed with you before the decisions are made public?
Martin, I do agree. I mean, we do hold the Commissioner accountable and he is scrutinised, and your colleague Mark Thompson will tell you that we do scrutinise him as best as we can. And in this particular case, I will be asking the question on Friday's meeting, Martin.
Thank you. Councillor Anthony Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question to Councillor Holt. I don't personally believe that councils are the problem when it comes to getting new houses built. I think it's a fact that local councils on average approve 9 out of 10 of new build applications. The current white paper in front of us seriously undermine local representation and will result in significantly less social housing being built. Rather than tinkering around with the planning system, the government should be committing to a programme of building social housing for rent and giving local authorities the ability to suspend the right to buy in their own areas, so that we can finally start tackling the crisis that's crippling the UK's housing market. Do you think that the council will be able to ensure that the voice of the resident is maintained and we can move forward with improving accessibility to social housing under the proposals in the government's planning white paper?
Funnily enough, myself and Councillor Lyons have a briefing tomorrow with one of our directors. Personally, I think it's going to do a lot of damage to local people.
Democratic.
One of the things that I definitely do want is for people to have their say or their thoughts to be put forward. They can, anything at all that people have, local people, it should be taken note of. I really don't understand what the hell the government are thinking about by having these white papers. There's a long way to go with it. There's briefings that we need. There's going to be a lot of talking to be done. Our residents going to be able to come to committees. It's the idea of the government to take away committees. It certainly looks like that to me. So I'm against it. I can't say much more than that because you'd probably shut me down with what I've got to say about it, because I feel that strongly about it. But I'll have a lot more to say once we've had briefings with our directors. But I certainly want our committees to continue in the way that they are doing at this moment in time.
Thank you. And are there any plans to engage with the public directly on these proposals after the council's come to a decision and been briefed?
As I only chair 3 committees at once, I can't really answer your question. That's more a cabinet question.
Thank you.
Councillor Nigel Patrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question of Councillor Ahmed, if he's still there. Oh yeah,
I'm still here.
Yeah.
I just switched you off for a bit.
Yeah. Serious crime is up again in rural South Kirklees with gangs targeting farms. Can you pass a message to the PCC asking him to do more to protect our people and property from these gangs?
I'll be more than happy to do that, Councillor Patrick, on Friday when I have the meeting with him.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor Warner.
Right, yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just a very short question about health and well-being to Councillor Kendrick. An issue that we are all involved with is the older people who've been largely housebound over the virus, and just wondered if there are any specific policies that the council are thinking of developing at encouraging the people who are still housebound or fearful of going out, whether it's the volunteers are doing stuff, walking buddies, etc. But I'm just wondering if there's potentially, and it comes up in health meetings, that many older people who've done hardly any exercise since COVID started are going to have a really difficult time this winter. And I just wondered if there are any plans to support, coordinate any particular activities. Thank you. Mute.
Right, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Thompson. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. I have a question reference to K&H to Councillor Mather. I just wondered if anybody was aware that apart from the gas fitters at K&H who had inferior PPE and going into between 10 and 12 houses a day separately, were one of the few teams that carried on working through the last 5 or 6 months. Roofers, gardeners, etc., and senior officers were either working from home or not working at all. And it seems unfair at best and dangerous at worst that these people were expected to do so many separate houses over such a long period of time without proper equipment. Thank you.
Mather.
Councillor Thompson, I would have to check, but all I can say is that all the workers had the appropriate personal protection equipment, and they were not carrying routine, they were carrying emergency and reactive work. And as far as I'm concerned, I have not heard of this particular issue that you're talking about, but please do get in touch, write me an email, and I will check this for you, because I am concerned, because our staff are key to our excellence in services, and we want them protected, and their health is of paramount importance.
Supplementary?
Supplementary is it wasn't emergency work. They were carrying out normal service work and normal work that they would have done pre-lockdown.
I will check and get back to you, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Is there no more questions?
No.
No. Right, there's no more questions, and it's 8:34, and we've come to the end of the meeting. So thank you very much, and that's it. Keep safe.